Super 8, another good J.J. Abrams movie. I think, this is really like his only like original movie, because like at this point, it's either been like sequels or reboots, and that's kind of what he does kind of later on in his career, just like a lot of like sequels and stuff. But yeah, this is really like his first kind of like just original kind of self-contained story. And I appreciate the fact that this is really like an homage to like Steven Spielberg and all, George Lucas and like all these kind of classic movies that he enjoyed watching when he was a kid, growing up in the 70s. And, the fact that this story is really about, just a bunch of like kids, just trying to make their Super 8 movies and, just enter in this film contest and everything. The fact that, J.J. Abrams like started off, making Super 8 movies with his friends, like Matt Reeves, who went on to do like Cloverfield, and, like Larry Fong, who was actually the cinematographer for Super 8, and, Michael Giacchino, who did the music and everything. Like they all kind of like were this kind of like nerdy band of kids, making out their own like little Super 8 movies. And then I appreciate that he kind of brought that aesthetic into this movie as well. A lot of people I know criticize the movie with the fact that they feel like it's like a Spielberg ripoff. It's like Stranger Things before Stranger Things. I don't think it's necessarily like a ripoff. I think it's, more of like an homage to Steven Spielberg. The fact that, Steven Spielberg was a producer on this movie, it just like gives, more credit to J.J. Abrams for working on it. Because I know that they had a relationship beforehand where J.J. and Matt Reeves were, I think they were like 16 years old. And, one of their first jobs was taking Steven Spielberg's old movies, old Super 8 movies, and like cleaning them up and everything. So that's what kind of started their relationship there. And Steven Spielberg was such an influence to him that he wanted to make a movie that, like paid homage to him. Obviously you can see the references like E.T. and Goonies and, a little bit of like Jaws, which are, some of my favorite movies. So I definitely wasn't complaining when I was watching it. But yeah, I think, he kind of takes those aspects and, kind of like just makes them his own. Right off the bat, has that kind of cool opening shot of like in the steel mill, and, kind of pushes in on that sign that says like such and such days without incident. And then, the guy walks up the ladder, takes the numbers off, and then it's like 0 days without incident. And then you realize like, oh shoot, like what's happening? And I know that was like an inspiration for JJ. Like he had that kind of image in his mind for, years and years and years as he was like making movies and stuff. And he didn't really know like what the story was going to be, behind that, but he knew that he wanted that to kind of be the opening shot of like whatever movie he did. And he decided to do it with this one and kind of create a story around it. But yeah, right at the bat, you just find out like all this emotion, and then you realize later on that Joe Lamb, the main character, his mother worked at the steel mill with another character, Alice, played by Elle Fanning. Her father also works at the steel mill, and he was actually supposed to go in, but he was all drunk and everything, so they decided to have Joe's mother come in to replace him, and then that's when the incident happened. So just creates this kind of like tension between Joe's father, the police officer played by Kyle Chandler, and then Alice's father. So this whole riff there, kind of jumps to the funeral, and you just see Joe outside on the swing set, with a locket that his mom gave him, years ago, and just kind of sets the tone from there. And yeah, there's just like a really just like emotional movie where, due to all these events with this monster coming into the town, this family, these kind of like two families come together. Starts off with, the kids trying to make their Super 8 movies. It's like the last day of school, and they need like an actress, so they ask like Alice Daner, who's like this like beautiful girl and everything. Joe has like a crush on her, and you realize that Charles, Joe's best friend, also has a crush on her as well. And they they have their Super 8 movies. They have to film on the train tracks because Charles wants to have like production value. So they're filming on the train tracks as the train's coming, and then as the train's coming, they look in the distance and they see like this pickup truck coming, and then it slams with the train and derails it, and it's like this big epic train crash sequence. And I know that J.J. Abrams was inspired by Steven Spielberg, who was also inspired by Cecil B. DeMille, who directed a movie called The Greatest Show on Earth. There's this whole big epic train crash sequence, so it's cool that kind of echoes throughout these filmmakers' careers. Like Steven Spielberg was inspired by that, and J.J. Abrams was inspired by Spielberg, and then he kind of brought that kind of full circle around to this movie. So there's the train crash, and then the kids run up to the pickup truck, and they see their teacher, Mr. Woodward, pulls out his gun, and it's like, forget what you saw here, or these guys will go after you and your parents, and you'll all be dead. So now they have to carry this secret of like what's going on, and then they realize that in one of these crates that was on the train were these little white cubes. Joe takes one of them, takes it back home, and then the kind of mystery goes on from there. And you also realize that there's this giant monster that gets unleashed into the town. So it's kind of like Jaws in a way, and Close Encounters is like another inspiration as well, where like there's like this weird stuff going on in the town. People going missing. The electricity is kind of like going in and out. People's dogs are running away from them, like showing up in like other counties and stuff like that. And then kind of like these kind of parallel storylines going on where Joe and Charles and the rest of the kids are trying to still make this movie, but there's also this drama between the two fathers that are going on. And then meanwhile you have the military capturing Woodward and trying to figure out like why he was trying to derail the train, because you realize later on that he was a scientist who was working on this project with the alien, trying to free him and everything. So then these two storylines kind of like merge together as the story goes on. And that was another thing that J.J. Abrams was inspired by. He had these two stories like of kids making super great movies, and then like an alien kind of getting unleashed into a town, and he couldn't really figure out an idea that worked for either one of them, so he decided to match them together. And I guess there's like pros and cons with it. Like I personally kind of like more of the kids making their Super 8 films and all the drama that goes on from there. I don't think you necessarily need the alien stuff, but I know that's kind of like, the E.T. reference, like, kind of like E.T. mixed with Close Encounters and Jaws. As the story goes on, the kids find out more and more about this whole plan of like the military trying to capture the beast and everything for research, and then trying to prevent it from reassembling all these cubes to make the ship to fly off. The military kind of like start this field fire, so then the town has to evacuate, but then obviously the kids have to figure out like what's going on, because previously the monster actually captured Alice, so they have to rescue her. They have to find this monster, and the truth is like, we have to find this thing. They escape. They have this whole plan of meeting up with the stoner character who has a crush on Charles's older sister, so they can get a ride to the school to find like the footage and everything to like prove like what the monster is. And then they finally get to the school, look at the footage, but then get captured by the military and get sent back to the base. But then the monster comes in, attacks the bus, the kids escape, and they finally go back into the town where Alice is, the secret entrance in the cemetery, because previously Joe was kind of like trying to run away from his dad, and then goes to the cemetery and then hears banging on the doors, so he can't suspect that's where the monster is. So they go back to the town, kind of go through the neighborhood that's being attacked by the tanks and everything, because all the technology is being going out of whack and all that. So that was like another fun aesthetic choice that they had, where they're kind of like mixing the ordinary with the extraordinary, where in the middle of this kind of like normal town, normal neighborhood, but you're seeing like these tanks and these rockets getting fired off and everything. They go underground. Joe rescues Alice. They confront the monster, and then the monster grabs him, lifts him up, and they have this kind of psychic connection. And then Joe's like, "It's okay, you can just go home." And then the monster kind of peels back like the layers behind his eyes, and you see his eyes kind of match Joe's mother's eyes in a way. And that's supposed to be like the connection that they have, kind of like a human connection, because previously they looked at the footage and Woodward explained that once the monster actually touched him, they actually had this psychic connection. So then they once the monster touches Joe, they realize, they have this psychic link between them. And then the monster realizes that, Joe doesn't have any intention of like harming him. So he puts Joe down, lets him go. And then, the friend's like, okay, what? Which is kind of what the rest of the audience was looking at, because I remember watching that sequence in the movie, and I was just like, wait, really? What? So I guess that's kind of like the only downside about the movie is like, I know it's trying to be like, I guess, Jaws meets E.T. in a way, and I don't necessarily think it works. I think either, just in my opinion, I think the kids should have connected with the monster earlier on, make it more like Iron Giant or something, and then like kids are trying to help, or E.T., and like the kids are trying to help the monster kind of get back home and everything. So they have a connection early on, and then kind of develops as the movie goes on. Then we have all the chaos that ensues. But with this one, they kind of wait till like the last minute where Joe and the monster have their connection, and then kind of goes off from there. The kids escape, the gravity and all that's being like, caught out of whack and everything. They're seeing like cars float up in the air and all this stuff floating around. They see metal objects kind of shoot forward towards the water tower where the monster is kind of like assembling all these parts of his ship together, which is kind of set up earlier on where, you know, like Alice and Joe are like watching like their little Super 8 movies, and like Alice is confessing the whole backstory of like why the mom was killed in the steel mill. And then, you know, the little white cube is like shaking on the desk and like shoots out of the wall, and they kind of see through the wall, hole in the wall that shot to the water tower. So yeah, all the characters are like reunited, you know, everything's kind of resolved. The fathers are reunited with their kids and they're watching, you know, as the ship is being assembled. And, you know, like just about as it's about to be assembled, you know, the locket kind of floats out of Joe's pocket and he grabs it, you know, and then it kind of opens up and you see the picture of like Joe and his mom. And then, you know, the whole like letting go theme comes on where the dad puts his hand on his shoulder and he's like, I got you. And then, you know, Joe lets the locket go, floats up to the tower. You know, it's kind of like that last piece, you know, the water tower shatters and the starship kind of rises up in the air. You know, like everyone's like watching. The emotional music's playing. You know, Joe holds Alice's hand. They're watching it, and then kind of floats up in the air. So you can kind of have that whole E.T. moment, and, you know, the whole fun post-credit scene of like we actually see the film that Charles and Joe and the kids were working on, which I thought was really fun. That they enter into the contest. So yeah, I think overall, it's a pretty good movie. Like some things like don't really work, some things do work really well, which was another kind of like what I said before with like the criticisms and stuff. But yeah, I think like the horror sequences are good, like the suspense, like especially, you know, the sequences right before, you know, the monster's about to attack someone, like the scene of like the guy kind of like in the cherry picker, and it's like what was that? And he, you know, sees the rustling in the bushes and he gets attacked. Or like the sheriff, you know, going into the convenience store, you know, getting attacked in front of like the gas station area, and then like the monster kind of going after the clerk as he's, you know, like listening to his music and all that. You know, I thought like all that was great. The visuals are great, you know, kind of said before, you know, kind of like brings like the ordinary and the extraordinary together. You know, he does a really good job at bringing in like that kind of old like 1979 aesthetic, kind of like, also said before, you know, it's like Stranger Things before Stranger Things, you know, kind of homages to old Spielberg movies, and, you know, like J.J. Abrams' past of making Super 8 movies with his friends. And I thought that was really cool. With the emotional scenes, you know, I thought he did a really good job with that as well. You know, just like overall, you know, I think when it came to just the human drama and, you know, just the stuff between like the kids and the parents and like the town, I thought that was really great. But when it came to like more of like the science fiction, you know, conspiracy theory stuff, I was like, it's like not as good. But yeah, I thought, you know, JJ did a really good job like directing the child actors. Like they were hilarious, you know, the fact they're like always like arguing with each other, and, you know, they really felt like, you know, real kids. If you were ever to do just like a movie about, you know, just like this kid, you know, trying to make Super 8 movies, then, you know, I'd be good with that. But, you know, he's big into like, you know, sci-fi and action and stuff. But yeah, we're just totally great. But just for me personally, I don't think it quite worked together. I think if he kind of rearranged story elements a little bit more, then it could have worked out just a little bit better. But I think overall, you know, I think it's a really solid movie, and, you know, just fun, just one and done, you know, homage to movies that he loved in the past. And, you know, I think overall he did a really good job.